Part 28. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 271. Fu Xuanyi suppressed the surprise in his heart, turned against the guests, took the initiative to pry open her lips, and broke in to plunder her. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. His obedient finally regained his memory. This is a very happy thing. The driver saw through the rear-view mirror that the two hosts behind him were kissing each other for some reason, and silently raised the partition, not wanting to look at it. Wei Yuxian was even more excited than Fu Xuanyi. She was immersed in this beautiful kiss. She not only responded to him, but also chased and played with him. She put her hands on his shoulders and straightened her back, just to kiss him better. The temperature inside the car rose, and Wei Yuxian's breathing became a little heavier. Fu Xuanyi did not dare to move too much, every movement was gentle, for fear of hurting her. I don't know how much time passed, but there was no air in Wei Yuxian's lungs and she was blushing so much that Fu Xuanyi let go of her. This kiss was offered by me obediently, and he liked it very much. Looking into her eyes and leaning against her forehead, he was still so close to her, and he called out with nostalgia in a low voice, "Good boy." Actuan. Wei Yuxian was still out of breath, and her eyes were a little blurry and couldn't focus, but she still responded to the man. A smile appeared on Fu Xuanyi's lips, and he was finally willing to separate from her. He wiped his thumb on her lips and asked, "Does your head still hurt?" Wei Yuxian shook her head gently and said, "It doesn't hurt anymore." "Do you remember everything?" he asked again, with a doting tone that was unique to Wei Yuxian. "Yeah, I remembered everything." She also smiled at him, and after she regained her breath, she reached out to touch his handsome face, full of nostalgia. "Actuan, I miss you so much." The person was right in front of her, but she still missed him very much. During the time when she lost her memory, it was like being covered by a veil. She still remembers the embarrassing things she did when she lost her memory, and she even remembers that she has relatives. It turns out that she is the daughter of the Jones family, and her father is the third gentleman of the Jones family. She is no longer a lonely little pitiful person. Not only does she have a father, but she also has a grandmother, uncle, brother, and younger brother, and she even has two nephews. During that time, when her mind was only 6 years old, she truly felt the joy of childhood. This can be regarded as making up for her missing childhood. After all, the childhood she lived in her adoptive father's and adoptive mother's home. She also had to thank this memory loss that allowed her to truly make up for her childhood. Otherwise, with her 21-year-old mind, she would not be able to act like a child. There is only one disadvantage of amnesia, that is, she has also forgotten important people, including her favorite Fu Xuanyi. Fu Xuanyi must have felt very uncomfortable at that time, right? And after she grew up, she was still so defensive about Fu Xuanyi. This man must be even more sad, right? She traced Fu Xuanyi's face carefully, trying to impress this face in her heart. Fu Xuanyi lowered his head and kissed her again on the corner of her lips, saying, "I miss you too, dear." Wei Yuxian's heart was touched, and her heart moved for this man. She said, "I will never forget you again." As soon as he finished speaking, the driver stopped the car at the entrance of the hospital. Wei Yuxian wanted to get up and get out of the car, but Fu Xuanyi didn't let her move. In his current position, he held up her hips and picked her up. Wei Yuxian shyly held his waist and buried her head in his neck without saying a word, silently allowing him to do this. Fu Xuanyi carried his most precious baby into the hospital and asked the doctor to conduct a series of examinations on her, for fear that she might have any hidden dangers. When Wei Yuxian was being examined, not long after, Fu's father, Fu's mother, and Grandma Wei Qiuan and Kylie all rushed over. She obediently accepted the doctor's examination on the hospital bed. When she saw people coming, she smiled sweetly, Her heart warmed, and she called for people one by one. Especially when Wei Qiuan was called, she felt like crying. When Fu Xuanyi went to check, the information showed that her biological parents had passed away, and she had no relatives in the world except her 2 children. But now she was told that her father was still alive, and that he was not an orphan but the 3rd gentleman of the Jones family. What a surprise! So, what happened in the first place? Wei Yuxian wanted to find out the truth. But she also knew that now was not the time to ask those questions. The most important thing today was to let the doctor take a good look at her body. After about an hour of examination, the doctor finally completed all the examinations and informed them that Wei Yuxian was in very good health and there was nothing wrong with her. Hearing this, the whole family felt relieved and came to Wei Yuxian. Fu's mother even had some tears in her eyes. Wei Yuxian held her hand and said, "Mom, don't cry. I have remembered everything and I will never forget you again." Fu's mother clapped her hand, wiped her tears, and said, "Okay, good child, just be well. Mom just wants to see you be well." After Wei Yuxian finished speaking to her, she turned her gaze to Wei Qiuan. This time, it was her turn to have tears in her eyes. "Dad," she took a deep breath and called out solemnly. Wei Qiuan's nose was also a little sore. He resisted the desire to cry, stretched out his arms to hold her in his arms, and shouted, "Eucalyptus." Wei Yuxian sniffed and couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She cried and said, "Dad, I thought." Wei Qiuan patted her back and said, "Eucalyptus, this matter is a bit complicated. Dad will tell you when we get back, okay?" Wei Yuxian nodded in his arms and said yeah. The father and daughter hugged each other for a while before they separated. Wei Yuxian's tears stopped flowing, and a smile appeared on her face, saying, "From now on, I will also have a father." Kylie touched her head and said, "Sister, you still have a brother. You still have many relatives in country E. You are no longer alone." Wei Yuxian nodded and said heavily. "Very good. There's nothing better than this, right? Let's go home. It's not good to stay in the hospital all the time. Let's take the eucalyptus home," Grandma said. Everyone had no objection, nodded, and took Wei Yuxian out of the hospital. Back home, Wei Yuxian was sitting in the living room, holding a baby in one hand, chatting with her family, as if she wanted to make up for the vacancies these days. Wei Qiuan also took this opportunity to tell her about his fake death. Wei Yuxian learned the truth, which was similar to Fu Xuanyi's investigation. Her mother was indeed no longer alive. But she still has her father, and she is already very content. She also has a large family of Jones family members, and people from the Fu family, so there is nothing to be dissatisfied about. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 272. After chatting with my family for a long time, dinner time arrived as promised. At the dinner table, the family members were still as enthusiastic as ever, serving Wei Yuxian dishes. After a while, a small mountain appeared in her bowl. She looked at the food in the bowl, smiled helplessly, stopped her elder brother who was still trying to pick up the food for her, and said, okay, thank you everyone, if I take more, I won't be able to finish it." Everyone could only stop picking up food and eat their own. Wei Yuxian worked hard to get rid of the food in her bowl, but she was helpless because it was too much. In addition, halfway through the meal, her family added more food to her, and she really couldn't finish it. Putting down her chopsticks, she rubbed her full belly and worried about how to prepare the next meal. After all, this was the whole family's wish. Before she could think about it, a big hand reached out and took away the bowl in front of her. She turned around and saw that it was Fu Xuanyi. This man was eating her leftovers without saying a word. Wei Yuxian didn't say anything, but quietly poked his thigh with her hand under the table and smiled at him. Fu Xuanyi glanced at her and quickly looked away, pretending that nothing happened. Everyone saw that Wei Yuxian really couldn't eat anymore, so they stopped feeding her. After dinner, Wei Yuxian only took a walk downstairs for a while, then went to the baby's room to play with the baby for about 10 minutes before going back to the room. As soon as she returned to the room, she went into the bathroom to take a shower, and when she came out, she checked the time on her mobile phone. Fu Xuanyi returned to the room at this time. Wei Yuxian looked at him and said, "Axuan, you go take a shower." The man said and entered the bathroom. Wei Yuxian put the phone aside, took a deep breath, got into the bed, and covered herself tightly with the quilt. After a while, she took out a bathrobe from under the quilt, threw it aside, and looked in the direction of the bathroom with a slightly red face. She was waiting for Fu Xuanyi to come out. During this period of amnesia, the person she felt most sorry for was no one else but Fu Xuanyi. She didn't remember him, but he still took care of her so carefully and tolerated her childish nature. Even when she grew up, she had to draw a clear line with him. At that time, Fu Xuanyi couldn't bear to mention how uncomfortable it would be. Therefore, she wanted to make up for this man, and she would make it up to him tonight. From now on, she will never forget him again and will always remember that he is one of the most important people in her life. She was thinking in her mind what she would do when Fu Xuanyi came out, how she could be more proactive, and how she could better compensate him. The more she thought about it, the redder her face became, and even her ears turned red. After thinking about it for an unknown amount of time, Fu Xuanyi came out of the bathroom, wearing only a bath towel, which could barely cover his lower body. The muscles of the upper body are all exposed. Even though she had seen a man's abs many times, Wei Yuxian still blushed when she saw them now. The man had a very good figure, which she could not describe in words. The clear abdominal muscles could be seen clearly without deliberately concave shape. The muscle lines on the arms are also very smooth, making people blush and heartbeat just looking at them. Wei Yuxian couldn't help but swallow under the quilt, and quietly pulled the quilt up to cover her nose, leaving only a pair of eyes exposed. The area covered under the quilt was red and pink, especially the face, which was the reddest. Actually, she opened her mouth and called out softly. Since she was calling under the quilt, her voice was a bit muffled. Huh, Fu Xuanyi sat down on the edge of the bed. The towel around his waist tightened instantly and showed signs of loosening. Wei Yuxian couldn't control her eyes and glanced at the man. She tightly grasped the edge of the quilt and whispered, "Turn off the light." Fu Xuanyi didn't understand what she meant, so he raised a slight smile at the corner of his mouth, said turned off the light, then lifted up the quilt and lay down. After lying down, he discovered what was happening under the quilt. Wei Yuxian was even more shy and nervous at the same time, thinking about how to take the first step. She had obviously demonstrated it in her head many times before, but when it came time to start operating it, she paused. No way to start. The strange thing is that she has too little experience. Fu Xuanyi took the initiative in the past, so she didn't have to think about what to do next. But this time, she couldn't help but take the initiative. Fu Xuanyi seemed to have read through her thoughts. He didn't move for a long time. The bedside lamp was still on, so he could clearly see her movements. This little guy is doing some mental building. Although he couldn't wait to be intimate with her, he thought that it was the little guy who took the initiative this time, so he held back. He wanted to see what surprise Guai Guai could bring him. After some mental construction, Wei Yuxian finally plucked up the courage, took a deep breath, sat up, took a step forward, sat on Fu Xuanyi, and looked at him condescendingly. Then, they kissed. I don't know how much time passed before the movement in the room finally stopped and silence returned. Wei Yuxian fainted from exhaustion and lay in Fu Xuanyi's arms, unconscious. She even washed herself before falling asleep. Fu Xuanyi took her to wash her body, and then gently carried her back. Looking at her tired brows, he kissed the corners of her eyes with pity. Have a good night's sleep. Wei Yuxian was so tired that she didn't even want to lift a finger. Even though she was awake at this moment, she didn't want to move a finger. Fortunately, today is another weekend, so she doesn't have to go to school, and Fu Xuanyi doesn't have to go to the company to work overtime. Last night, she had chosen the right time and dared to do that. Otherwise, even if she wanted to compensate Fu Xuanyi again, she would have to wait until the weekend. Thinking of last night, Wei Yuxian's face turned red. She was tired last night and took the initiative for a while. If she hadn't run out of energy in the end, this bad man would still want to. She quickly pushed the waste out of her mind and stopped thinking about it. But how could it be possible to control it and not think about it? She opened her eyes, looked at the white ceiling, moved her sore body, but still didn't want to get up. The man next to him didn't know when he got up or where he was now. She rubbed her waist, sat up and looked at the alarm clock on the bedside table. It was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No wonder Fu Xuanyi disappeared and she was so hungry. She actually slept until this time. I don't feel it at all. So what time did they go to bed last night? Wei Yuxian buried her head in her hands, feeling that she was too embarrassed to see anyone. Forget it, if I missed breakfast time, I also missed lunch time. Ah! She went crazy on the bed for a while. The door to the room was opened, and Fu Xuanyi came in and saw her rolling on the bed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 273. It seems that last night was not tiring enough, and his obedient boy still has the strength to roll on the bed. Fu Xuanyi walked in and called out, "Good boy." Wei Yuxian stopped scrolling and hid herself under the quilt to hide her red face. As soon as this man came in, the memories of last night swept up overwhelmingly, making her blush for a while. Fu Xuanyi was so cute by her actions that he sat down by the bed, reached out to dig the person out of the quilt, took the person into his arms with the quilt, and kissed her on the lips. Woke up. Wei Yuxian couldn't escape from the man's arms, and due to the commotion just now, her body was even more sore and weak, so she simply stopped resisting and stayed peacefully in the man's arms. Wake up, she said. Are you tired? He kissed her on the cheek a few more times. Wei Yuxian avoided his kiss and asked him, what do you think? Fu Xuanyi chuckled softly, I think Guai Guai is not tired enough. He was rolling on the bed just now. How about I make Guai Guai more tired tonight? Wei Yuxian reached out and punched him several times, and said, I was so exhausted last night. It's all your fault. If you hadn't insisted on me, how could I be so tired? But you did a great job last night, didn't you? He said, leaning into her ear and saying a few more words. Before she finished speaking, Wei Yuxian's face turned red and she turned around and punched the man several times. Don't say it, don't say it, why is this man like this? He actually said such a shameful thing. Fu Xuanyi held her hand and said dotingly, I won't say anything anymore. Does your hand hurt? Wei Yuxian's hand didn't hurt much, but at this moment, she said, it hurts. It hurts. It hurts like hell. This tone seemed to be coquettish with Fu Xuanyi, at least, that's what Fu Xuanyi thought. His darling is acting coquettishly with him. How cute. There is no one cuter than his darling in the world. He brought her hand to his mouth, blew a few times, and said, my husband, I'll blow it for you, and it won't hurt anymore. When Wei Yuxian mentioned the title of husband, she could not help but think of the man who forced her to call him so many times last night. At first, she thought about making it up to this man, and hesitated for a long time before calling her husband in his ear, but the man didn't think it was enough and made her call her husband many times. If she doesn't scream, this man will always find a way to force her to scream. In short, this man is so hateful. She conveniently covered the man's mouth and said fiercely, "You are not allowed to call me that." Fu Xuanyi raised his eyebrows, took her hand in his again, and called in her ear, "Wife." They were a legal couple and he could call them whatever he wanted. Wei Yuxian is so shy that she wants to be an ostrich. Why is this man still so thick-skinned? She simply closed her eyes and pretended to be dead in his arms. Fu Xuanyi called her wife several times in her ear. It was as addictive as chanting sutras. Wei Yuxian became impatient at his shouting, so she raised her head and kissed him, gagging him. Now, the world finally became quiet. With a smile in his eyes, Fu Xuanyi lingered with her and refused to let her go. Wei Yuxian originally just wanted to block his mouth, but unexpectedly, she fell into another trap. She couldn't escape and was forced to be intimate with this man. After a while, the kiss finally ended, and Wei Yuxian breathed a sigh of relief. In order to prevent this man from having any more dangerous thoughts, she hurriedly said, "Please help me find a set of clothes. I have to get up and eat." Fu Xuanyi really wanted to continue, but when he thought that his obedient boy hadn't eaten anything since last night, he held back. "Put the person on the bed, get up and find clothes for her." After finding a set of home clothes, Wei Yuxian put them on under the quilt. After struggling for a while, she ran out of energy. Soft and hungry. Fu Xuanyi took the person out of the quilt, let her hold his waist, supported her buttocks, and led the person into the bathroom. Wei Yuxian rested her head on his shoulder, letting him hold her with peace of mind, and said in a soft voice, "I'm so sore, can you be gentler next time?" She tried to talk to him. Fu Xuanyi said that he would do whatever he wanted to do, and it would not change. He will not give in when it comes to bed. Everything else is fine, but not this. Besides, Guai also enjoyed it very much last night. It looked so beautiful. Wei Yuxian added, "How about the time be shorter next time? I don't want to sleep through lunchtime again." Fu Xuanyi still agreed, not being obedient. Listening to the soft voice in his ears, he couldn't help but think. "Be good, call me husband." His voice was a little hoarse. Wei Yuxian turned her head to look at his face, shook her head and said, "I don't want it." "Just scream," he coaxed her. Wei Yuxian would not be fooled by him. "I won't bark." After calling, there will be more than just one call, there will be many, many calls. Just like last night, she couldn't stop, she wouldn't be fooled again. After entering the bathroom, Wei Yuxian just sat on the wash basin like a baby, waiting for Fu Xuanyi to serve her. It's not that she doesn't want to do it herself, but Fu Xuanyi doesn't let her do it herself. Fortunately, she didn't have much strength, and this man was willing to oblige, so she didn't bother to do anything. With Master Xian taking care of her, Wei Yuxian washed up comfortably, was carried out of the bathroom, and went downstairs to have breakfast. Wei Yuxian knew that she could not make this man change his mind and let her go, so she could only pray in her heart that there was no one down there and everyone had gone to take a nap. Her prayers seemed to have worked. After going down, she didn't see anyone, which made her breath a huge sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was no one in the living room, not even a servant, otherwise, she would have wanted to bury her head in the ground. After sitting down at the dining table, Fu Xuanyi did not let her sit on the chair by herself. Instead, he asked her to sit on his lap and let the servant serve the meal. Wei Yuxian covered her face with her hands, not daring to look at the servant's eyes as they looked at them. She hid herself and covered her ears. "As long as I can't see them, they can't see me," she thought silently in her heart, deceiving herself. After all the servants had gone down, she removed her hand, glared at Fu Xuanyi, and said, I want to sit by myself. Be good, don't make trouble, the chair is uncomfortable. Wei Yuxian was still fighting for herself, no, it's okay. Fu Xuanyi refused, holding her waist with one hand and holding her tightly, while feeding her with the other hand. Wei Yuxian turned her head to the side, I'm not a child, I can eat it myself. She brought the tableware over and started eating by herself, without mentioning the chair. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 274. After eating, Wei Yuxian felt comfortable all over, but her body was still a little soft, but there was nothing else wrong with her. She lay lazily in Fu Xuanyi's arms and didn't want to move. Fu Xuanyi carried her to the sofa, found a movie and showed it to her. In this rare leisure time, the two of them had nothing to do and no one around. It was simply their world. Wei Yuxian just woke up and was not sleepy at the moment. After watching a movie for a while, she felt bored and started chatting with Fu Xuanyi. Actuan, where is Ding Nana? Only now did her slow mind have time to ask about the culprit who caused her amnesia. Yesterday, she was busy reuniting with her family and making amends to Fu Xuanyi. How could she have the time to think about this unimportant person? It was only now that I was free and had nothing to do that I remembered this person. Speaking of which, Ding Nana is really hateful. The original intention of letting her live was to give her a taste of the dangers of society, but who would have thought that not only did this guy have no repentance, he would actually attack her again. This time, no matter what, I can't let her go. Who knows what surprise will happen next time? It's not that she is cruel, but some people don't need to be merciful. When Fu Xuanyi heard her question, he said two words softly, dead. Wei Yuxian was stunned for a while before digesting the news and said, it's okay if you die. If you die, you won't harm society anymore. Fu Xuanyi touched her head, which was the injured area, with a flash of distress in his eyes. Wei Yuxian took his other hand, played with it with both hands, and asked, then tell me about Ding Nana's situation. What background does she have that can capture me under your nose? Being able to capture her in the Fu family's territory, it seems that Ding Nana's background is not simple. I don't know if those people will still cause trouble for Xian after Ding Nana's death. Fu Xuanyi told her about Ding Nana and the Barrett family, and then told her about his cooperation with the Jones family. In the end, she found her family by accident. This world is such a coincidence. Even though the two countries are so far apart, they can still meet each other and find their families. This is a very lucky thing for Wei Yuxian. If it hadn't been for this trip to country E, she didn't know when she would know that she still had family members in this world. It is also possible that I will never know it in this life. After listening to Fu Xuanyi's words, Wei Yuxian sighed and said, evil people will be punished. We have solved Ding Nana, which can be regarded as a contribution to society. She is not the only one who has been bullied by Ding Nana over the years. I don't know how many people were bullied by Ding Nana before her. And most of those people chose to swallow their anger and endure it silently. Because they couldn't beat Ding Nana and couldn't compete with her, they chose to tolerate and be bullied. Even she didn't know how she would have been bullied by Ding Nana if she hadn't met Fu Xuanyi. She was completely in no mood to watch that boring movie. She turned around and sat astride Fu Xuanyi's lap, holding his neck with her hands and looking at him. Fu Xuanyi put his hands behind her waist to protect her, and looked at her lovingly without blinking. Wei Yuxian put a hand on his cheek and said, it's not easy. There are always people who want to separate us. What should we do? Fu Xuanyi tilted his head and kissed her hand and said, I will make all those people disappear. A smile appeared in Wei Yuxian's eyes. She said and asked, are you very sad during the time when I lost my memory? After all, she looked like a child, and her brain circuit was a bit strange. Speaking of this, she remembered that one night, Fu Xuanyi wanted to do something intimate with her, but she was so naive at that time that she thought he wanted to steal her clothes. It was so embarrassing that I even went to my mother to complain. And when I grew up, I was still so wary of him. I always thought he was a scumbag and wouldn't even let him touch me. How uncomfortable must this man have been for so many days? Fu Xuanyi thought about those days and said, "It's a little bit. The main thing is that I can't get close to Guiguai, which is very distressing. But when Guiguai turns into a 6-year-old, he is still very cute and can do many things that adults cannot do. I promise that I will never forget you again." Wei Yuxian said, "You also have to protect me, okay?" "This is natural," Fu Xuanyi said. He naturally wants to protect his obedience. Thinking of those days of amnesia, Fu Xuanyi actually had one regret in his heart, that is, he could not hear his family call him Brother Axian. Uncle Axian shouted a lot, but Brother Axian didn't say a word. At this time, maybe you can make up for your original regrets? Fu Xuanyi said tentatively, "Be good." Huh, Wei Yuxian tilted her head and responded. Fu Xuanyi pursed his lips and said, "Call Brother Axian." Wei Yuxian remembered this. When Fu Xuanyi asked her to call her brother Axian, she refused. She insisted on calling her uncle Axian, forcing her to call him a generation older. Thinking about it now, it's still embarrassing. This man actually mentioned this matter again. What does he want to do? Do you have to see her embarrassed? She turned her head to one side, not looking at the man, and thought about turning her body away too. Before she could take action, the man's waist was firmly grasped by the man, not giving her a chance to turn around. Fu Xuanyi pushed her hand hard, took her into his arms, and said in her ear, "Good boy, let me know." Wei Yuxian frowned, "Don't scream. Even if he forced her to call her husband yesterday, he will force her to call him brother today. This man really has one thought every day." Today, she refused to be called by this name at all. She was bored to death. Fu Xuanyi coaxed her, gently massaged her waist and said, "Just scream." Wei Yuxian only believed what he said. "What's the cry?" After calling out, it was more than just a cry. She knew this man very well. She closed her eyes and pretended to be dead, pretending to be asleep and making a cute little snore. Fu Xuanyi looked down at her, poked her tender cheek, and shouted, "Be good." Wei Yuxian ignored him and didn't answer. Fu Xuanyi poked again and continued to call, "Wife." Wei Yuxian still ignored him, looking completely indifferent, but her attitude was firm. Fu Xuanyi's mouth showed a hint of helplessness, and he kissed her, on her forehead, on her cheek, on the tip of her nose, then on her chin, eyes, wherever she saw. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 275. Soon, Wei Yuxian couldn't bear it anymore. She opened her eyes and glared at the man. She reached out her hand to cover his head and said, "Stop kissing." Fu Xuanyi raised his eyebrows and said, "If you don't scream, I will keep kissing you." Wei Yuxian was speechless at how rogue this man was. Where is the cold master Xian that we agreed on? Where is the ascetic Buddha you promised? Who is this person now? Who said Fu Xuanyi was aloof? Who said Fu Xuanyi was abstinent and not close to women? She was the first to disagree. Fu Xuanyi was also said to be taciturn. Who is this man chattering in her ears now? The tips of Wei Yuxian's ears turned red. She looked around to see if anyone was there. When she found no one, she breathed a sigh of relief. She said, okay, why don't I scream?" She pushed Fu Xuanyi's head away, straightened up, and looked at him. Fu Xuanyi leaned back on the chair comfortably, listening attentively, waiting for her to call. Wei Yuxian was debating in her mind how to speak, but she hesitated for a long time without saying these four short words. It's one thing to think it in your head, it's another thing to call it out. The two are completely different. Just like last night, she had clearly thought about what to do in her mind, but once she put it into practice, she couldn't do anything. Fu Xuanyi rubbed her waist, reminding her not to be distracted, and also urging her to hurry up. Wei Yuxian opened her mouth several times, trying to call out, but she still couldn't. This title was too. What is your name, brother? This man is the best at keeping things together. Looking at the man's eyes, that expectant look, she still screamed even if she couldn't. A Xian. I called two words, intermittently, but incomplete. Wei Yuxian's shyness relapsed. Fu Xuanyi looked at her with encouraging eyes. She mustered up a lot of courage after seeing this. Actuan, brother Actuan. Finally speaking out, Wei Yuxian breathed a sigh of relief once again. Fu Xuanyi said the smile in his eyes became more obvious, and he praised her, it's great to be a good girl. Wei Yuxian gave him an angry look and thought, what a great guy, what's there to boast about? Fu Xuanyi kissed her lips again, first lightly, then deeply. Wei Yuxian wanted to refuse, but the man was very domineering and refused her at all. He plundered in her mouth. At the top of the stairs, Grandma, who had just woken up from her nap, softly walked downstairs. She was only halfway up the stairs when she saw the young couple making out on the sofa in the living room. In an instant, she stopped, covered her mouth and snickered, then walked back to the room. I thought about coming down for a walk, but who would have thought I would see such a scene? She is young and energetic, and the couple has a good relationship. Wei Yuxian had no idea that her grandma had come over and was taken away by Fu Xuanyi, and finally she fell limply in the man's arms. When they separated, they were panting, looking at the man with affection in their eyes. After spending a while with Fu Xuanyi in the living room, Wei Yuxian felt sleepy. After adjusting her breathing, she yawned and said, I'm sleepy. Fu Xuanyi turned off the TV without saying a word, got up with the person in his arms, and went upstairs to his room to sleep. I was very energetic just now, but now I'm sleepy. I don't know what's going on with my body. As soon as she got on the bed, Wei Yuxian said good afternoon in a daze and fell asleep so fast that Fu Xuanyi even laughed. He tapped the tip of her cute nose, kissed her on the lips, and said silently, good afternoon. When it was time for dinner when she woke up, Wei Yuxian had regained a lot of strength, her body was not so sore anymore, and she felt much better. Fu Xuanyi slept with her until this time. When she woke up, her side was finally not empty. She was warm in Fu Xuanyi's arms. Drowsily, he asked in a soft voice, what time is it? Fu Xuanyi said, it's time for dinner. Wei Yuxian woke up a lot, got up and said, then you have to get up quickly. I missed breakfast and lunch, so I can't miss dinner anymore. Fu Xuanyi followed her into the bathroom. After washing up with her, he went downstairs to have dinner. Downstairs, the family members have almost all sat down, except that Wei Qiuan and Kylie have not come back. They are busy with company affairs every day. They are really busy, even busier than Fu Xuanyi. A new company has a lot to do. Wei Qiuan and Kylie can't wait to divide themselves into two to handle those things these days. Then there is the matter of moving. After discussing with Wei Yuxian yesterday, they decided not to move out, but to live in Fu's mansion. First, it was convenient to meet Wei Yuxian, and second, Fu's mansion was very big, so it would be okay for them to live there. Everything is based on Wei Yuxian's feelings. Wei Yuxian didn't want to be separated from her father, grandmother, and brother. They finally recognized each other. Even if they had nothing to say every day, it would be nice to see each other. Wei Qiuan and others naturally fulfilled her wish. Moreover, Wei Kuoan couldn't bear to be separated from her now. He just wanted to see his daughter more and stay with her more. After Wei Yuxian sat down, she called people once. Before dinner was served, she held Shishi and Zhizi in her arms, teasing them to talk and asking them to call them mom. Shishi and Zhizi were very considerate. Their little faces couldn't stop laughing at their mother's teasing, and they called mom many times. Wei Yuxian then guided the two children to call them daddy, grandparents, etc. The two children had very good learning abilities and almost all of them could be called out, but they still sounded a little blurry. But Wei Yuxian was also very satisfied. After Wei Kuoan and Kylie came back, everyone started eating. After dinner, Wei Yuxian and the babies were playing in the corner of the living room. The children's laughter, and hers, spread throughout the living room. When the children were tired of playing, Wei Yuxian and Fu Xuanyi took them back to their rooms one by one and asked the nanny to take care of them. They went back to their room to take a shower and get ready for bed. Lying on the bed, Wei Yuxian had just closed her eyes when the person next to her rolled her over and landed on top of him. Wei Yuxian lay on his chest and said, "Not tonight." The tone was very firm. Fu Xuanyi did not engage in that matter and said, "Yesterday, someone confessed to you. He has not forgotten this matter. Who knows what kind of ignorant boy dares to covet his good boy?" Wei Yuxian also thought of this and said, "That's what happened. He handed me a love letter and I refused to accept it. He forced it into my hand. But don't worry, I threw the love letter into the trash can and everyone saw it." "Really," Fu Xuanyi said, "it seems that many people still don't know that you are MRS Fu. If you don't know, you don't know." "I'm not a big shot," Wei Yuxian said nonchalantly. "If there's one, there's two. What will you do next time someone confesses to you?" Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 276. If someone confesses to me again, of course I will reject it. "Why, do you still want me to accept their love letters?" she said half-jokingly. Fu Xuanyi pinched her waist, which was a little itchy. She laughed out loud and said, "I'm just joking. Don't take it seriously. I will definitely throw away all their love letters." "This is not a solution." Fu Xuanyi rubbed the place where he had just pinched again. "Wei Yuxian, then what do you think we should do? You can't put a MRS Fu sign on me." Fu Xuanyi teased her, "That's a good idea." Wei Yuxian punched him a few times and said, "Don't be joking, this is a very serious matter." Fu Xuanyi stopped teasing her and said, "Then I can only declare my sovereignty." "How do you want to declare sovereignty?" "Go to our school to hold banners." As she said this, Wei Yuxian even laughed. When she thought of that scene, she wanted to laugh. Although it was impossible for Fu Xuanyi to do such a thing due to his status, thinking about it, it was still possible. Fu Xuanyi also laughed, scratched her nose, and said dotingly, "Just wait and see." "As long as it's not too embarrassing," Wei Yuxian added. Fu Xuanyi stopped talking, thinking about how to let more people know that Guai was his, so that those who were not discerning could settle down and stop thinking about other people's wives. Wei Yuxian didn't know Fu Xuanyi's plan and didn't bother to think about it. She thought that this man would not do anything embarrassing. After all, he was Master Xian of Kyoto and he also wanted to save face. Thinking of someone confessing their love yesterday, Wei Yuxian thought of the girls yesterday afternoon. She had a terrible headache at that time, but she also vaguely heard the girl in the lead saying that her father was the leader of the Fu group. If you say this to others, it will be very impressive. The Fu group is such a big company, the richest man in the country. The people who can work inside are not ordinary people, and others will look up to them. What a pity, that girl kicked a hard iron plate, and it was a very, very hard iron plate. I'm really sorry, the president of Fu Group is her husband. Even without the Fu family, she still has her father, and the Jones family is her solid backing. Even if the Jones family is not in the country, it is still more than enough to deal with a small team leader. Besides, this matter was not her fault in the first place. The wrong person was the girl. There was obviously a seat in front of her, but she refused to go and insisted on grabbing her own seat. She doesn't cause trouble, but she's not afraid of it either. She will not use her status to do unfair things, nor will she let others bully her. Everyone is born equal, but there are always people who bully others and look down on others just because they have a little bit of family background. Just like Ding Nana, just like Chin Zimu and the group of girls yesterday. She asked, "Did you give those girls to Lu Changxiao again yesterday afternoon?" Fu Xuanyi said, These little things were naturally left to Lu Changxiao. Then how are they doing now? I don't know. In short, it won't be easy. Fu Xuanyi's hands restlessly got into her clothes and slowly moved up. Wei Yuxian grabbed his hand and looked up at him with a frown. Fu Xuanyi immediately calmed down and stopped moving. Wei Yuxian also took out his hand and threw it aside, saying, "Be calm, I was tired enough last night." Fu Xuanyi put his hand back on her waist and said, "I still want to." Wei Yuxian rolled off him and said, "I fell asleep." Fu Xuanyi took the person back and coaxed him, "I was wrong, dear, I don't want to think about it anymore." Wei Yuxian twisted the flesh on his waist a few times, but the man had no reaction. On the contrary, her own hand hurt a little, and she groaned and turned her head to the side, pretending to be sleeping. Fu Xuanyi went to rub her hand and asked, "Does it still hurt?" Wei Yuxian didn't say anything, so he continued to rub her and said, "I'm really wrong, dear, please pay attention to me." Wei Yuxian ignored him for a while and then said, "You don't even know how to understand me. It was just one night last night, and my waist is not healed yet. I was wrong, really wrong, please forgive me." He continued to coax. The man said a lot of nice things, which she had never heard before, and she felt so touched that she reluctantly forgave him. Lying on top of him, they were close to each other, so intimate that they could hear each other's hearts and breathing. His strong heartbeat sounded so reassuring and full of security. In this quiet night, staying with the people you love, chatting about the little things in life, this feeling is so good. Wei Yuxian suddenly remembered something and said, "Actuan, we don't seem to have ever been in love." She met Fu Xuanyi because of money, and met him again because of their children. After that, she moved into Fu's house and kept her distance from Fu Xuanyi. Later, I slowly developed feelings for him, and naturally they got together. After that, they got married, everything was so logical. The part of falling in love was directly ignored by them, and they entered the palace of marriage, got married, and raised children, and no one was left behind. In the novels and TV she read, people falling in love were all sweet. She also saw a lot of young couples on campus, holding hands and kissing secretly, which she had never experienced before. So, what does it feel like to be in love? She wondered a little too. Now that she and Fu Xuanyi are married, can they still fall in love? Fu Xuanyi thought about their journey together, and it seemed that they had never been in love before, and had never let his darling feel the feeling of falling in love. But the problem is, he doesn't know how to fall in love. However, as long as Guai Guai wants it, he will give it to her. "If you want to talk, then let's talk," he said. Wei Yuxian sounded a little excited and asked, "Is it okay?" Will it not disturb you at work? Fu Xuanyi kissed her and said, nothing is more important than you. Wei Yuxian's eyebrows were curved and she was in a good mood, and she asked, how about falling in love? I have no experience. She is also a novice in relationships. Before meeting Fu Xuanyi, she never thought about who she would be with in the future, let alone that she would get married so soon. Fu Xuanyi patted her back to reassure her and said, leave it to me. Wei Yuxian then left it to him with confidence to see what tricks he could come up with. I'm sleepy, I'm really going to sleep, good night Xian. After chatting for so long, she was too sleepy. She wanted to get off Fu Xuanyi, but he wouldn't let her go. He held her waist and wouldn't let go. There was no other way, so Wei Yuxian could only lie on top of him, find a comfortable position, and sleep. Good night, sweetie, Fu Xuanyi said softly, patting her back gently to coax her to sleep. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 277. The next day was Sunday, and Wei Yuxian still had one day to rest. On this day, she was still lazy, didn't want to move much, and didn't go out, spending time with Fu Xuanyi. There was a tacit understanding that everyone in the family avoided them and did not disturb the young couple's conversation. After finally regaining his memory and remembering the person, he naturally had to give them some time to let them communicate with each other. And when Fu Xuanyi was getting tired of Wei Yuxian, he didn't forget to take out his mobile phone to look up love strategies. After watching it for a day, he almost understood what falling in love was. Then wait until next week's weekend to practice it. There is no time this week. Soon, it was Monday. Wei Yuxian had to go to class and Fu Xuanyi had to go to work. But Fu Xuanyi was not in a hurry to go to work today, because he had to do something at Wei Yuxian's school. After breakfast, Fu Xuanyi personally took Wei Yuxian to school. Some time ago, because of Wei Yuxian's resistance to Fu Xuanyi, the driver took her to school. Now that Wei Yuxian has recovered her memory, Fu Xuanyi will naturally send her to school in person. After driving to the school and arriving at the teaching building, Wei Yuxian got out of the car first, and then she saw Fu Xuanyi also got out of the car. Just when she was wondering why Fu Xuanyi also got out of the car, Fu Xuanyi had already come to her side, took her hand and walked into the teaching building. Wei Yuxian was even more confused about what this man wanted to do. In the past, this man would go to work in the company after sending her here. She asked, why did you follow me in? Is the company on holiday today? Fu Xuanyi said, no, I have to do something. What are you going to do at school? Wei Yuxian thought hard and couldn't figure out what he was going to do at school. Fu Xuanyi didn't tell her, but just said, you will know later. Wei Yuxian could only let him lead her into the teaching building with doubts in her mind, and sit down in the classroom. Fu Xuanyi was sitting next to her, as if he had made his home here. Wei Yuxian took out the book, looked at the man beside her, and asked, do you really not have to go to work? Judging from the man's posture, he looked like he was going to class with her. Fu Xuanyi leaned on the chair, took her hand in his and played with it, and said, go back later. Gradually, more and more students entered the classroom, and everyone saw Wei Yuxian and Fu Xuanyi sitting in the back. At first, everyone was stunned for a moment. It wasn't until someone recognized that the person sitting next to Wei Yuxian was Fu Xuanyi that everyone suddenly realized. Wei Yuxian was confessed to her last week, and Master Xian accompanied her to class today. This is a declaration of sovereignty. Damn it, Master Xian, you are so fast. But there is one thing to say, Wei Yuxian and Mr. Xian are really eye-catching when they sit together. Wei Yuxian is good-looking, Mr. Xian is handsome, and both of them are good-looking. It was also the first time for Wei Yuxian to experience such a scene. Taking classes with Fu Xuanyi was a fantasy before. But now, This man is actually sitting next to her and attending class with her. The students were talking quietly, and they didn't know what they were talking about, but after they said a few words, they would look back and it was obvious that they were talking about the two people behind them. Master Xian is even more handsome than in the photos. When I saw Master Xian's photos before, I thought he was extremely handsome. But now that I see him in real life, he is actually much more handsome than the photos. To tell you the truth, this is the first time I've seen the real Master Xian. Who wouldn't be? If it weren't for Wei Yuxian, we wouldn't have the chance to meet the richest man in the country. Before I saw them sitting together, I couldn't feel the connection between them. But now, I just want to say that they really match each other. What kind of daddy boyfriend is this? Wei Yuxian must be so happy. I just saw that Master Xian was still holding Wei Yuxian's hand, and he couldn't bear to let go for a moment. When did God give me such a good man? I would trade my ex-boyfriend's 10 years of singleness for it. Ha ha ha, that's good. Then I'll trade my ex-boyfriend's 20 years of singleness for it. Wei Yuxian could feel that the classmates in front were talking about her and Fu Xuanyi, but their voices were too soft for her to hear clearly. But judging from the faces of the students, they probably weren't talking bad words about her and Fu Xuanyi. When the class time came, the teacher walked into the classroom to teach. Wei Yuxian wanted to pull her hand away, but Fu Xuanyi refused and still held her left hand. Wei Yuxian turned to look at him and signaled him to let go with her eyes. She was going to class. Fu Xuanyi pretended to be invisible and lowered his head to play with her tender hand seriously. Wei Yuxian didn't know what fun there was in a hand, and how this man could play it so seriously. Fortunately, he wasn't playing with his right hand, otherwise she wouldn't be able to write. Wei Yuxian ignored him and listened to the lecture while writing with her right hand. Fu Xuanyi played with her hand for a while, then stopped playing. He squeezed her fingers away and intertwined with hers. He supported his head with one hand and watched her take the class seriously. Guai Guai, who listens carefully to the class, is also very cute. The gaze around her was so intense that Wei Yuxian felt uncomfortable looking at him and felt that letting him attend class with her was a wrong choice. She turned her head and said with her lips, "Don't look at me, look ahead." Fu Xuanyi's lips curled up into a smile, and he replied to her with his lips, "I only have obedience in my eyes." Wei Yuxian was stunned by what he said and quickly turned her head away, no longer looking at the man. If you keep reading, you might even know that this man is going to say something even more embarrassing. She learned a lesson this time. Next time, she must not let him sit next to her in class. At the end of the class, Wei Yuxian listened a little absent-mindedly, and the students in front also listened a little absent-mindedly. They really wanted to know how the aloof Master Xian got along with Wei Yuxian. Therefore, from time to time, a classmate would look back at them, and then a mysterious smile would appear on their face. Wei Yuxian. After finally staying up until the end of get out of class, Wei Yuxian finally knew what the real purpose of Fu Xuanyi's visit was. Fortunately, she will be in this classroom for the next class, so she has more free time between classes. Not long after class, Lu Chengcheng led someone into the classroom and came to Wei Yuxian and Fu Xuanyi. When Wei Yuxian saw this person, she felt ashamed. The students in front also turned around, waiting to watch the show. Even the students who were playing with their mobile phones put down their phones and concentrated on watching the show. Wei Yuxian opened her mouth, but found that she couldn't say anything. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 278. The person standing in front of them was the boy who confessed his love to Wei Yuxian last week. And this boy was a little confused when he saw Fu Xuanyi. Just 10 minutes ago, he had just finished his first class. Thinking that there was no class for the second class, he went to the cafeteria to buy something to eat. Who would have thought that before he walked out of the classroom, a man came to him. The person who came was none other than Lu Cheng. He said, "This classmate, our Master Xian invites you to come over." The boy asked confusedly, "Master Xian? Where can I go?" He thought about it in his mind for a while before he remembered who this Master Xian was. Last week, after he confessed his love, many enthusiastic classmates gave him a lot of science knowledge. For example, Wei Yuxian is Master Xian's wife, and what kind of status does Master Xian have in Kyoto? After making up for it, he broke into a cold sweat. Only then did he know the identity of the person he confessed to. Master Xian, a man who can dominate Kyoto. A character who cannot be offended no matter who he offends. And Wei Yuxian is his legal wife? The kind that has a certificate. He actually confessed his love to a married woman. No wonder Wei Yuxian refused to accept his confession no matter what she said that day. But he actually forced the love letter into Wei Yuxian's hand, telling her to accept it. When he thought of this, the boy felt extremely regretful, but what had happened had been done and could not be undone, so the only thing he could do was to pray that Wei Yuxian would not tell Master Xian about it. After 2 days of nothing on the weekend, he thought the incident would just go away. Who would have thought that on Monday, Master Xian would come to his door? Lu Cheng didn't say anything more to him, he just said, "Follow me." The boys didn't dare to disobey, so they could only follow Lu Cheng, and came to Wei Yuxian and Fu Xuanyi tremblingly. At this moment, the boy was no longer fooled. When he saw Fu Xuanyi's cold eyes, he was shocked. Too horrible. Master Xian is so scary. His eyes were so cold. Did you want to kill him? The boy didn't dare to say a word, nor did he dare to look at Wei Yuxian, let alone Fu Xuanyi. He lowered his head, bit his lip, and was about to burst into tears. Fu Xuanyi glanced at the boy's appearance. He was indeed a bit pretty. No wonder he fell in love with his obedience. But compared to myself, it's still far behind. He didn't say a word, just looked at the boy. The boy felt like he was stabbed in the back and he couldn't stand anymore. The students below also felt Fu Xuanyi's invisible aura. In an instant, the entire classroom became several degrees colder. Some people are even hesitant to leave the classroom. It seems that this place has become a Shura field and is not a place where they should be. The boy didn't even dare to raise his head, and his hands began to tremble, as if he was letting Fu Xuanyi do whatever he wanted. Still Wei Yuxian couldn't stand it anymore. She tugged on Fu Xuanyi's clothes and said, "Stop scaring him." Fu Xuanyi turned his head away and raised his eyebrows, as if asking, "Are you defending him?" His obedience actually protects other men. A certain Mr. Xian's jealousy was overturned in an instant, and there was such a strong smell of vinegar that even Wei Yuxian could smell it. Wei Yuxian. She didn't do anything, she just said something. Why did this man become jealous? But who told her to have a jealous husband? At this time, I can only coax. She whispered in his ear, "I just don't want to waste your time. Besides, it will be class time later, and I don't want to affect the teacher's class." Fu Xuanyi asked, "Didn't you defend him?" Wei Yuxian nodded, "No, absolutely not. How dare she admit to defending him, unless she doesn't want to go to class today?" And she felt that this matter was actually unnecessary. The boy didn't do anything wrong, he just confessed to himself. There are many people in the world who don't know that she is Mrs. Fu. Fu Xuanyi can't do this for everyone, right? But after this time, her reputation will spread throughout the campus. Those who want to confess their feelings in the future will have to keep their eyes open. In order to have some peace of mind in the future, Wei Yuxian would not stop Fu Xuanyi from doing this. There is nothing better than a once-and-for-all solution. Only then did Fu Xuanyi turn his attention to the boy again and said his first words to him, "Did you send a love letter to my wife?" The boy felt so regretful in his heart that he was about to cry. He took a deep breath and without even daring to raise his head, said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Xian, I didn't know that this was your wife. I can't see the mountain." Fortunately, it didn't lead to any big mistake. "You sir have a lot of money. Please let me go. I will definitely take a detour when I see madam in the future. I will also tell the classmates around me to try not to disturb madam." As he spoke, the boy's voice started to tremble a little, and he didn't know whether it was because he was nervous or frightened. Fu Xuanyi didn't speak, just looked at him quietly, making the boy break into a cold sweat. "He is really scared. I was able to speak just now, and I had to pinch my thighs to muster the courage to say it. What does it mean that Master Xian doesn't speak now? Are you not satisfied with his answer just now? Wu, but he has already chosen the nicest words to say. Wu. Then should he say some nice things again?" Just when the boy was thinking about how to say it again, Wei Yuxian spoke up, "Okay, it's good if you know. It's okay. Please come over, classmate, and go back." She pinched Fu Xuanyi's hand and reminded him to stop. This boy made no mistake in the first place. They couldn't go too far in public. Otherwise, how would others view Fu Xuanyi? A company as big as his can't be ruined by such small things. The boy did not dare to leave. He quietly raised his head and glanced at Fu Xuanyi, wanting to see what he meant. As a result, Fu Xuanyi remained silent and turned his head to look at Wei Yuxian. The boy didn't know for a moment whether he should go or not. Master Xian hasn't even spoken yet. Can he leave? Lu Cheng couldn't stand it any longer and said, "You can leave as soon as madam lets you go. Please go." Only then did the boy realize that the person in charge here was Wei Yuxian, not Master Xian. He quickly said "Oh" and said, no trouble," as he said this, he walked out of the classroom. Wei Yuxian also breathed a sigh of relief and looked around at the classmates below. After catching her gaze, the classmates turned their heads back, saying that they didn't see anything. She stood up, pulled Fu Xuanyi up, and said, "Let's go outside and talk." Fu Xuanyi followed her without saying a word, and was pulled out by her hand, his eyes always on her back. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 279. Wei Yuxian took Fu Xuanyi to the empty classroom next door. There was no one here. She even took a special look to see that the classroom would be empty next time. She was talking to Fu Xuanyi here without worrying about anyone coming in. After finding a seat and sitting down, Wei Yuxian said, "Okay, you've called me, and I've admitted my mistake. It's time for you to go to work in the company now, right?" Fu Xuanyi held her on his lap and said, "Why do I feel that Guai is still protecting him?" Wei Yuxian shook her head and shook her head several times, "Absolutely not. It must be your illusion. Fu Xuanyi, we have received the certificate, do you think I am that kind of person?" Fu Xuanyi put his hand next to her face, rubbed the corners of her lips with his thumb, and said, "Of course my Guai is not that kind of person." "That's good, you know I'm not that kind of person." She took off his restless hand and glanced outside the classroom guiltily to see if anyone was passing by. Fortunately, no one passed by and saw them getting along like this. In fact, she wanted to get off Fu Xuanyi's lap. After all, she was outside, so it would be bad to be seen. But judging from the look of this man, he probably wouldn't let her go, so she didn't waste any energy. "It's my duty to speak for other men," the man said matter-of-factly. Wei Yuxian looked at him and said, "I think this matter is not a big deal in the first place, it's just a matter of meaning. Didn't you see his scared look? Is your reputation very bad outside?" I think those classmates don't dare to look at you openly, they all look at you secretly. I don't know about that, Fu Xuanyi said. Wei Yuxian didn't say these things anymore. They were not important matters at first. Once they were said, it was over. Then should you go back to work now? What time is it? Are you going to work overtime tonight? She urged people to leave quickly. The second class was in 10 minutes, and she didn't want to have this man accompany her to another class. This man refused to settle down and disturbed her class. Drive me away obediently, Fu Xuanyi asked. Wei Yuxian really convinced him. Where was the focus of her words? But she couldn't say it out loud, so she coaxed him and said, I'm not driving you away, I just don't want you to work so hard and be too tired from working overtime, and I don't want to not see you all night. What she said was true. Fu Xuanyi worked overtime, and she felt distressed when she saw it. Just a while ago, when Fu Xuanyi came back, he was so busy that he couldn't see anyone for a whole day. No one is seen even on weekends. She still wanted to hold him to sleep at night. After such a long time, she was used to sleeping with Fu Xuanyi beside her. A faint smile finally appeared on Fu Xuanyi's lips, and he said, kiss me before you leave. Wei Yuxian was embarrassed and looked outside the classroom again and said, it's outside. Let's kiss again when we go back. When he gets back, he can kiss her as much as he wants. Wei Yuxian didn't know that Lu Cheng had already led his people to guard outside, and no one would pass by and disturb them. Fu Xuanyi insisted, now. Wei Yuxian's ears were slightly red. I don't know when someone will pass by outside. You should go quickly. Class time is almost here. I have to go to class. Kiss me obediently. Fu Xuanyi said nothing but 4 words. Wei Yuxian really had nothing to do with this man. She looked outside several times with a guilty conscience. After confirming that no one was there, she kissed Fu Xuanyi on the lips. Okay, please leave quickly. If you don't leave, class will begin, she urged. But Fu Xuanyi was not satisfied with her gentle kiss. He lowered his head, took her delicate lips in his mouth, and kissed her deeply. Wei Yuxian's little heart almost jumped out of her chest. Scared to death. While pushing Fu Xuanyi with his hand, he glanced outside the classroom, for fear that someone would pass by at this time. Fu Xuanyi was very strong, and she had never won before. This time, it was the same. As long as Fu Xuanyi didn't let go, she couldn't even think of ending the kiss. Fu Xuanyi was very serious. He went deep in to absorb the delicious food. After a while, he let go. Wei Yuxian's lips swelled slightly, but she didn't notice it at all and breathed a sigh of relief. The man finally let her go. She gave Fu Xuanyi an angry look and said, okay, hurry up and leave. I really have to go to class. With that said, she got off Fu Xuanyi's lap and pulled him outside. Fu Xuanyi followed her and walked outside with a faint smile on his lips. When they went outside the classroom, Wei Yuxian discovered that Lu Cheng and others were guarding outside. This classroom was in a corner. As long as they guarded a door, no one could come through. Wei Yuxian looked back at Fu Xuanyi, and when she saw the smile in his eyes, she knew that he had already known that someone was guarding outside. She vented her anger and punched Fu Xuanyi several times. Why didn't you tell me and made me worry for a long time? Fu Xuanyi smiled even more wantonly and said, I didn't ask any questions. Wei Yuxian sighed and glared at him again, her look so cute. She let go of Fu Xuanyi's hand and said, hurry up and leave. Fu Xuanyi didn't leave. He came to her, rubbed her hair and said, remember to miss me. Wei Yuxian gave a perfunctory hum twice, turned around and wanted to leave. Fu Xuanyi grabbed her, and when she didn't react, he kissed her on the forehead and said, that's it? Wei Yuxian's heart suddenly rose and she looked towards the corridor over there. Several people had seen it. This man. Wei Yuxian screamed in her heart and wanted to hit him. At this moment, the class bell suddenly rang. She didn't care about it anymore and hurried to the classroom. As soon as she left, Lu Cheng and others naturally followed, leaving Fu Xuanyi standing alone, with a brighter smile on his face. The few classmates who were watching the theater quickly returned to the classroom, grinning from the corners of their mouths to their temples. Oh my God! Master Xian and his wife are also very good at it. This pair is so good looking, they are so excited to eat. Wei Yuxian was almost ashamed to see anyone, her face felt a little hot, and she ran all the way back to the classroom, just in time to catch up with the teacher who also entered the classroom. Sitting down, she panted slightly and covered her face with her hands, trying to cool it down, but her face was extremely hot and the temperature did not cool down for a while. Wei Yuxian felt extremely embarrassed when she thought of the smiling eyes of those classmates just now. If she had known that Fu Xuanyi was going to kiss her in the corridor, she would not have stayed in the corridor any longer and would have left without saying a word as soon as she left the classroom. But now it was too late to regret, everything had already happened, and besides being embarrassed, she was still embarrassed. I just hope those classmates don't tell anyone, otherwise, she will be embarrassed in school. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 280. After finally finishing the day's class, when Wei Yuxian saw Fu Xuanyi, she beat him randomly. It's all this man's fault. If it weren't for him, why would there be so many people looking at her today? When she thought of her classmates looking at her and smiling secretly, she was so shy that she didn't even dare to look at those classmates. Fu Xuanyi let her beat her for a while, then took her into his arms, rubbed her hands, and asked the driver to drive. He asked, "Does it hurt?" Wei Yuxian was so angry that she didn't want to pay attention to him. She turned her head to the side and pretended to look at the scenery outside the window. Fu Xuanyi tilted his head, appeared in front of her, and said, "Don't be angry." Wei Yuxian snorted, not being coaxed so easily. If he was coaxed so easily, how dare this man do such a thing next time? It's okay to kiss in the classroom, but this man wants to do this in the corridor and be seen by others. Fu Xuanyi coaxed him all the way, and finally at Wei Yuxian's request, Wei Yuxian forgave him after he repeatedly promised that he would never do such a thing again in the future. Last week, Fu Xuanyi promised Wei Yuxian that he would take her to experience the feeling of falling in love. So when the weekend came, he took action. On this day, the weather was sunny and the sun was just right. The sun was not too strong, which would be uncomfortable for those who don't know how to be exposed to the sun. On this day, Wei Yuxian had no classes and Fu Xuanyi did not have to go to work. In the morning, Wei Yuxian slept until she woke up naturally, had breakfast with Fu Xuanyi's service, put on her coat, and went out. In April in Kyoto, the weather is gradually getting hotter, but it will still be a bit cold in the morning and evening, so you need to wear a coat. Wei Yuxian was dressed warmly and was sitting in the passenger seat. The driver was Fu Xuanyi. Today, it was just the two of them, no one else bothered them. It's rare to see young couples come for a date early in the morning. Wei Yuxian was looking forward to today to see what surprise Fu Xuanyi would bring her. After Fu Xuanyi made a thorough strategy and consulted a lot of information, he decided to take Wei Yuxian to a famous scenic spot in Kyoto. This is a paradise for young lovers, and many people in love like to go there. Fu Xuanyi drove there and it took him more than half an hour to arrive. There were not many people in the morning, so he easily found a parking space inside. After getting out of the car, Fu Xuanyi took Wei Yuxian's hand and walked with her on the alley. This scenic spot is actually just a few alleys lined with shops and several internet celebrity check-in spots. Driven by the internet, it has become popular. There were really not many people in the morning, there were only a few young couples on the street, and many shops on the street were not open, making the street look rather depressed. Wei Yuxian put her hand in Fu Xuanyi's pocket and held his hand, which was very warm. She looked at the street and asked, "Did we come too early? There is no one on the street." Fu Xuanyi looked at his watch. It was past 10 o'clock and said, "It's a bit early, but there will be more people soon. At noon, the place will be more lively, and at night, it will be even more lively." Wei Yuxian followed Fu Xuanyi in confusion, not knowing the direction, and asked, "Then what should we do now? Just keep walking on this street? Until it's time to eat?" It was only after 10 o'clock. If it was time to eat, they would still have to walk for more than an hour, and her legs would probably be ruined. Fu Xuanyi was amused by her words and turned to look at her. His eyes seemed to say, "How can my darling be so cute?" "Of course not," Fu Xuanyi said, "there's not a lot of people in the morning. Let's watch a movie to kill some time. There is a movie theater here, a national chain one, but it's not on this street, it's on another street." Wei Yuxian followed Fu Xuanyi obediently and asked, "What movie are you watching? Have you bought the tickets?" By it on the spot they came to an intersection, and Fu Xuanyi took her across the street to another street without hesitation. As soon as she got there, Wei Yuxian saw the 4 characters XX film and television. At this point, it was already open for business. She also saw 2 young couples walking in, and one of the young couples was holding a cup of milk tea in their hands. It looked like hot milk tea. She swallowed, and for some reason she wanted to drink milk tea. She obviously wasn't a fan of these snacks before, or in other words, she didn't have the chance to eat them before, so when she grew up, she had no interest in them. But now, what's going on? She actually wanted to drink. She took another look at the surrounding streets. Just next to the cinema, there was a milk tea shop open. It was beautifully decorated, but there was no one in the shop yet. Looking at the brand, she recognized it. It was found in several cafeterias in her school. It must be a national chain. She rubbed her thumb in Fu Xuanyi's pocket and said, "Actuan, I want to drink milk tea." Fu Xuanyi looked at the open milk tea shop, thought for a while, and took her there. If it's just one time, there shouldn't be any problems. The expression on Wei Yuxian's face became obviously happier. If her hand hadn't been in Fu Xuanyi's pocket, she would have wanted to jump up and down. The 2 walked into the milk tea shop, and the clerk who was busy took time out to help them order. Wei Yuxian looked at it for a long time before ordering 2 cups of signature milk tea, full of sugar and hot. After the clerk took the order, he handed them a small ticket and asked them to sit aside and wait. Wei Yuxian and Fu Xuanyi sat down at the nearest seats and chatted about what movies they would watch later. "I don't know what movie will be shown today." "What type of movie do you want to watch?" Wei Yuxian asked. Fu Xuanyi, "It's up to you." Wei Yuxian took out her mobile phone to search for any newly released movies recently. After watching them for a while, she couldn't find a movie she liked. At this moment, the clerk packed 2 cups of milk tea and said, "Miss, your milk tea is ready." Wei Yuxian stood up, took the milk tea into her hand, and handed a cup to Fu Xuanyi. Fu Xuanyi did not refuse. He tied a straw and took a sip. Without saying anything, he silently picked up the milk tea in his hand and walked out with Wei Yuxian. It was too sweet and not to his taste, but for Guiguai's sake, drinking it wasn't a problem. Wei Yuxian couldn't wait to take a sip. The sweet and greasy taste instantly occupied her entire taste buds. She liked this taste. Girls are always more receptive to sweet things and fall in love with them quickly, and Wei Yuxian is no exception. She still remembers the last time she had milk tea, which was when she was a freshman in college. The boy named Cheng Jinjiao invited her to drink it. "I didn't feel much about milk tea at that time, but now I feel that this thing is extremely delicious. It's also possible that it's because there's someone else around."